Hey Sugar Geeks, Liz here. Today we're going to venture into the world of bundt cakes. I personally love bundt cakes, but there's more than you may expect to them, and we're gonna learn all about it. Coming up next on the Sugar Geek Show. I like big bunts and I cannot lie. Okay, bundt cake. What is a bundt cake? This really interesting, special type of cake. Just kidding, it's just a cake in a bundt pan. That's literally all it is, but you can't just take any cake, put it in a bundt pan and bake it up because depending on the cake batter, it might be too, like loose and won't hold its shape. There's not like a specific type of recipe that's like, this is a traditional bundt cake recipe that my great-great-great-great-grandma, no. So, this is my bundt cake. This is how I make it. I'm starting a new thing. Join me. But my bundt cake is gonna be moist. That just like triggered a whole bunch of people. So this bundt cake is gonna be super moist, have a beautiful crumb, and is gonna be able to be eaten all week long without drying out. Let's do this. Butter. You may notice that this is a lot of butter. It's like a butter cake. You can actually use margarine, I have learned. I don't know why you would do that, but if you're one of those people that just like to use margarine, go for it. Okay, so we want to cream the butter and the sugar to the point that it's white and fluffy. I think sometimes people are like, when you say cream, what do you mean? Creaming is just like combining butter and sugar to the point where it's light and fluffy and white in color because we're incorporating air. And that's what makes that really nice fine crumb. So like this is not creamed, this is just like barely mixed. We want to keep going. Keep going. Depending on your mixer, this could like take up to 5 minutes if you're doing it with like a hand mixer, or if you're using the Bosch mixer, it's gonna go pretty quickly. Boom. That was like what, a minute? So this is like nice and white and fluffy. That's perfect. So now we're gonna add in our eggs one at a time so that they incorporate, and you wanna make sure that these eggs are room temperature. So I usually put these eggs in when they're still in the shell. When they're still in the shell, you put them in hot water and it just kind of warms them up. Otherwise, they will curdle with the butter and that will ruin everything. You'll have cornbread bundt cake, and that's not what this recipe is. Once you can't see any egg whites, you're done. All right, I got my flour. I'm gonna add in my baking soda, baking powder, and salt, and then just whisk to combine. Okay, so I have my buttermilk, and I'm gonna add my oil and my vanilla. All right, so now we're going to alternate flour and liquids just so they combine evenly. Depending on the mixer you're using. This might take longer to combine the flours in there. You just don't want to like go crazy with the mixing because then you're gonna overdevelop the gluten, and then you're gonna get tunnels, which are like these long tubes going through your cake. And literally one of the best things about bundt cake is that gorgeous crumb when you slice through it. So just like don't go crazy with your mixing. Watch, everybody's gonna undermix now. All right, so we're using, aside from just buttermilk, a little bit of oil, and that's also going to keep this cake nice and moist over a period of time, but I have more tricks to keep it moist coming up, so stick with me here. I do want to say at this point is where you can start adding in dried fruit, nuts, chocolate chips, purees, like chopped fruits, like all kinds of things can go into this cake as a base. That's why I'm starting with the vanilla cake, so we can just like make all of the bundt cakes from here on out. So this is like our master bundt cake recipe. Master bunts. So you can see the batter is super thick. That's why I say not all cakes can be used as a bundt cake, because it needs to be thick like this so that it holds its shape when it comes out of the pan. So you can put like whole pieces of chocolate in here, like chocolate chips, not a whole chocolate bar, although, I don't know, you do your thing. And it's gonna hold that stuff and it's not gonna sink to the bottom. So the thick batter is actually really great. All right, let's talk pans. This is a bundt cake pan. This is like the traditional bundt cake shape. This is widely regarded as the best bundt cake pan. It's made by Nordic Ware, the OG cake pan inventors. And it has nice handles here, a non-stick surface, so it creates this really nice brown crust on the outside, and it doesn't like stick, hopefully. One of the things I did learn when I was testing out this bundt cake recipe was I use, cake goop, which is flour, oil, and vegetable shortening. The recipe's on Sugar Geek Show. And I put that on the inside, but I was so paranoid about it sticking, I made it really thick and I ended up getting like little white spots on the outside, so don't do that. Do use a pan spray that has flour in it. If you're just using like an oil, it's gonna stick. And I think that's the problem that a lot of people have, is they just use like a traditional pan spray like you would use for cookies or something, and then it sticks and then you cry. But one of the tips I did learn about getting it to unstick is you can take like a hot towel and like put it on the outside, and that kind of warms up that sugar, so it should release. But I say if it sticks, just eat it anyways, like cover it in some frosting. Frosting fixes everything. We are using an aluminum bundt cake pan. Just because you can get cake pans in silicone or ceramic or glass doesn't mean that they're the best. So if you use silicone or ceramic or something like that, it's gonna just kind of come out sort of dull colored. You're not gonna get that brown crust. It's like the one time you really want your cakes to be brown on the outside. This was only like $22 on Amazon too, and it's like hefty. It's really nice quality. I did learn that the cake pan, like the bundt cake pan, was originally made of cast iron, which I think is really cool, and I kind of want to find one, and is like a version of something called a Gugelhof, or a Gugel. Okay, so Gugelhof is a type of bread that has like nuts and fruit in it from Europe, I think it was said it was, which actually looks delicious, honestly. And then Germany took the Gugelhof and made it like their own, and they started making bundt cakes. And then when the German people started like coming to America, they like couldn't take their Gugelhof pans with them because they were like so super heavy and everything. So it wasn't until the 1940s that Nordic Ware made a version of the Gugelhof pan out of this lightweight aluminum. And that's kind of where we got the bundt pans now. The funny thing is, when they first made them, nobody wanted them. They were like, oh, this is a weird pan. I don't want that at all. And then this lady, I don't remember her name, she entered this contest with her bundt cake recipe called the Tunnel of Fudge, which I think is hilarious. And it won $5,000. So of course, every housewife in America was like, what's your recipe? Give me your recipe. Where's this pan? We need these pans. And now the bundt cake pan is the most purchased pan in all of the US. Like, it is like America's pan. When you're greasing, make sure you get this middle part too, right? Okay, I'm not gonna have any thick lumps in there. This is gonna be the most gorgeous golden crust you ever did see. So when you're putting the batter in the cake pan, you wanna just kind of go in dollops, because it is so thick. If you just like filled it too fast, you can get like big air pockets. So we're just gonna do little dollops all the way around. My oven is already preheated to 350 degrees, and you want your rack, your oven rack, not to be in the very center, just like a little bit lower, because the pan is so big. If you put it right in the center, the top of the bundt is gonna be like really close to the top element, and then it's gonna get a little too brown. When I was first testing this, I even thought, this batter is like not enough to fill this whole pan, but it rises quite a bit, like more than you think it would. So don't be freaked out. They actually make them smaller too, like half size. So if you don't want a big old bundt cake for some reason, or you're just making it for yourself, they do make smaller ones, and you can half this recipe, like no problem. I'm just spreading that out so it's nice and level. There is like 1.5 inches of space between. To me, that only looks like half full, but it was perfect. Okay, I am putting this into the oven for 45 to 50 minutes. I know, because I tested this, it takes 47 minutes on the dot for me, but depending on your oven's temperature, might be longer, might be less. Do not take it out of the oven if the skewer comes out with goopy, batter on it. Like, it might look done on the outside, but you have to test it. All right, so our bundt cake is done. I'm gonna put down a cookie sheet pan, and then a rack, and then the bundt. If you could only smell that. Now I'm gonna let this cake cool for 15 minutes before we flip it over. All right, so I always put a cake board underneath the bundt because I feel like it's easier to move it later, but that's totally optional. I flip you over. Oh, I felt it already come out. Yay, it released. Ta-da! Beautiful. So I am going to simple syrup the top of my cake first with about 1/3 of my mixture. You always want to pour out of the bottle first so you don't get crumbs. So if you were making a different flavored cake, you could have different flavored simple syrup. You have like orange, cinnamon, ginger. You see how it just soaks right in there. Simple syrup is totally optional if you don't want to take this extra step, but it will keep your cake moister for longer. It looks gorgeous. And see, if we didn't have this pan on the bottom, that simple syrup just gets like everywhere. And I have little crummies in here in my leftover syrup, so that's why you never want to dip straight out of the jar. All right, now we have to let this cool for another 2 hours. Just because you don't want it to be warm when you put that final layer of glaze on it, or it will all just like run off. So just be patient, just set it to the side. You don't have to cover it, do your dishes, like whatever, and then we'll come back and glaze it. Time to make the glaze, my favorite part. Not making the glaze, but glazing. Okay, so sugar. I'm going to sift my sugar so I don't have any lumps. This is 2 cups of powdered sugar, or about 8 ounces. Probably should use a bigger bowl than this. You'd think I know how to do this by now. I don't sift things, I'm lazy. Now we're gonna add in our vanilla, and I'm using a little bit of orange extract because I just think it tastes delicious. All right, and I'm gonna add in 2 tablespoons of buttermilk. You could use regular milk, you could use water. I think buttermilk tastes the best because it's got kind of like tang to it. And then what we're shooting for is a thick glaze that's going to coat the cake pretty evenly and not drip all the way off, but not so thick that it's unmanageable. So if you need to add more milk, you can. All right, so this is number 3 on the buttermilk. So I still feel like that's pretty gloopy still. I'm gonna add just a little bit more. You just want to add little bits at a time. Don't go crazy. It's a lot easier to make it thinner than it is to make it thicker. I feel like that's a pretty good consistency. That was about 3 tablespoons plus maybe a half a teaspoon. Good. All right, so now I'm going to take my spoon. I'm just going to dip this on the back here and put a line through it. And if it holds, like, I don't want it to run all the way off. So this is kind of like a test to see how well it's going to stick on the side of the bundt cake. So if it just runs all the way off and it's super thin, it's not thick enough. All right, so our glaze is looking great, but it is slightly off color. It's a little bit ivory looking because of the vanilla. So if you're extra like I am, you can add a couple of drops of white food coloring, maybe a 1/4 teaspoon, and it just makes it really white. You could actually add other food coloring too, like pink or red or whatever, and make your glaze a color. So the secret to getting these nice drips is to actually just create a ring all the way around the top. Don't try and drip it. I mean, you can come back and add more drips later, but when you just do the ring all the way around the top, it creates a perfect drip. Oh my God, look at that. It's so beautiful. And look, it just drips perfectly. And see, if you really want to like come in and add some drips, you can. But I feel like it just glazes itself perfectly. It's so pretty. I mean, does that not look like the commercial for the perfect bundt cake or what? Okay, once it's done dripping, you can reach underneath there to that cardboard, and just transfer it to a cake plate. Ta-da! The bundt of all bundt cakes. It's so good. It's just vanilla. It's moist and fluffy and tender. This would be really good with some fruit and some ice cream. So that's it. That's everything you guys need to know about making the most amazing bundt cake ever. Go forth and make all the bunts. I'm Liz Merrick, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.